Hey everybody, how you doing? It is the evening after the Bills' second media available OTA session of the year, and I can tell you a little bit about the OTAs quick here before we get into the main topic of the night. First, I thought Josh Allen had an okay day. Nothing great. Look, it's June 2. Who cares? I like Spencer Brown a little bit. He did pop, especially going against AJ Epinesa, and Epinesa was a topic of conversation too. The Bills have been very impressed with the way he's kind of molded his body. Leslie Frazier talked about the fact he had a full offseason this year to kind of bulk up and stock up. Deion Dawkins said he's noticed a difference. Remember, he's got to go head-to-head with Epinesa a lot. You'll hear more about that tonight on News 8 at 11. Devin Singletary, Dawson Knox, issues with the hands again. Singletary actually basically reenacted the drop he had last year in the AFC Championship game. But again, look, it's June 2nd. I think the big thing from the Bills' point of view is that Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders both were at practice. Both look midseason form, or as midseason as you look June 2nd. Sanders is a silky smooth guy. It's going to be fun to watch him develop with Josh Allen and the rest of this offense. But the main topic of this offseason has been the vaccine, whether the Bills players will take it, and how much it seems like the Bills head coach and GM both want their players to take it. And we'll get into the reason for that in a minute. But today, the player who spoke on it, or who at least was asked about it, was Jordan Poyer. Now, Poyer, as many of you know, is married to Rachel Bush, who's been very outspoken against the vaccine on Twitter. And Poyer has mentioned a couple times, made a couple comments here and there, that he is also on that side of the debate. So Poyer today, when he came on for his media Zoom, right off the bat said, look, guys, I don't want to answer any questions about the vaccine. I just want to talk about football. So if you got football questions, go ahead and ask them. Well, later on, one of the members of the media, and I won't name him, most of you guys know who it is, but I don't need to out him here, did ask a couple of questions to Poyer about the vaccine. And I've talked to a host of people tonight who had varying degrees of disgust about the media asking those questions. And I just want to talk about how media kind of handle that situation. The first thing about that is, even though the Bills, or in this case Jordan Poyer, did not say he wanted to talk about the vaccine, it is kind of our job to push a little bit. Remember, we're not here to be a mouthpiece or a public relations arm for a team, or if you want to get into the news side of it, for a politician or organization. But from my point of view, from the sports point of view, we are not here to just pump up a team or a player. If they do well, we will certainly do that because they will have earned it. In this particular case, there really isn't well or not. There's just, what the player says and, what it means for the team. And that's one thing we got to understand. With the vaccine, this is not the same debate as people have in open social media where it's, I think people should, I think people shouldn't. It's not any of your business. There is actually a direct connection between how many players on an NFL team have been vaccinated and what those teams can then do when it comes to day-to-day operations and meetings and who wears masks and who gets tested. And from the Bills' point of view, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have both talked about the fact that they would prefer players be vaccinated for various reasons, but mainly so that the Bills can have normal 2019 operations inside the facility again. So when Jordan Poyer says, I don't want to talk about it, well, look, for our job from the beginning is to probe and really, again, push just a little bit to try and learn what they're thinking, what the reasoning is. Look, we're not trying to cause a problem. And again, one of the points I want to make with this is that when a player says they don't want to talk about something, even if you're going to push a little bit, you're not going to do it like a jerk because you want to kind of feel them out. And what happens invariably in these situations, maybe not invariably, but most of the time, when a player says, I don't want to talk about something, they do end up talking about that topic to some degree. Not specifically about maybe the hardcore main point of it, but a sidebar or a secondary storyline or point of that topic. And as someone in the media, again, you're trying to push, but you want to do it smartly. You can ask a question, and exactly the way it was stated today by the reporter was, look, I respect the fact that you don't want to talk about this, but let me ask you about this point of view of it. And you kind of feel out where the athlete is. Sometimes an athlete will not want to talk about something, but they might want to avoid talking about one particular angle of it, or maybe the most meaty or polarizing or angry part of it. They avoid that. But anything else, you can get information on the athlete about that. So from the reporter, when an athlete doesn't want to talk about it, if you're going to ask a question anyway, you do want to kind of feel them out. And again, start the way it was started today, which is, look, I respect that you don't want to talk about this, but this other thing that's related to it, can we talk about that? And see how the athlete goes. Now, look, sometimes an athlete will be like, no, I don't want to talk about it, and, gets aggravated or upset. At that point, you back off. But you do, most of the time, will have a little bit of a feeling out process to, okay, where are they? How frustrated, how much do they want to stay away from this topic, and see if there are other avenues to where you can discuss something. The other thing too is that the athlete itself, himself or herself, matters. In this case it was Jordan Poyer, who's generally a pretty decent guy. A guy that doesn't get upset a lot, a guy that can handle the heat for sure. And with a guy like that, I think most of us would feel okay about, okay, I know he didn't said no, but let me see if I can gain some information here, and then see what the answer to that is, and kind of work through it a little bit. There are some players, you'll know from past experience, once they say I'm done, then you just don't bother, because you're not going to get anything, you're not going to gain any information or knowledge about it. So the way that it happened today, and if you find the Zoom, I'm sure the Bills have it if you want to go to their website. The way it was handled today, I thought was fairly appropriate too. And no one in the media wants to. I think the expectation or the stereotypical feeling is that the media person is trying to create a headline or trying to create a problem or create a click, build a story that people will click on. First of all, keep in mind, when it comes to local media in sports, the positive story is we're going to get the clicks. If I just want clicks, I'm going to post a story on my website about how great Josh Allen is. I mean, that's easy. Or how great a coach Sean McDermott is. If that's what I'm looking for, that's what I'm going to do. If I go to my website and post something controversial or negative even about a Bills player, that's not getting clicks. That might work on a national forum. And there are some, now look, if it's a breaking or exclusive story, then yeah, that might work. But when it comes to general, often, predominant web stories, if I want clicks, I'm putting something positive on there. But in terms of the relationship with the player, it really does not do us any good to aggravate the player unnecessarily. Now, again, as a media member, you do have to, standing up to him is the wrong word. You do have to be willing to ask the tough question. But no one wants to just tick the guy off for no particular reason. And if he says no, and then you go back with a second question or a third question, and you get the clear impression that there's going to be nothing worthwhile or nothing gained from this line of questioning, then you don't bother and move on to something else. But again, there are many occasions, and I would say more often than not, where there are other parts of the story that you can address and can learn something and can educate your viewer or reader or subscriber. As a media person, you can't be afraid to again ask the tough question. But no one in this business is trying to take someone we have to deal with on a regular basis. Again, Jordan Poyer is a player that myself and every other member of the Bills media is going to talk to another couple dozen times between now and the end of January. So it does not behoove us to unnecessarily try and tick that guy off. And you're not going to do that in that Zoom session. You're going to be careful, you're going to be respectful, you're going to be fair, but when a question needs to be asked, you're going to ask it. And I've got a lot of people who asked me on Twitter today why we're bothering to ask about COVID, that taking the vaccine is a personal choice, and that's absolutely true. The difference here is that, again, there are rules that the NFL has in place that allow a team to have more freedom if they take the vaccine. And more importantly, in the Bills' point of view, the head coach has talked about how much education they want. And he said very specifically, we don't want to convince guys, we want to educate them. But has talked about how much better and easier and more freedom there would be if the team was vaccinated. And the GM said on publicized media that he would cut a player if it could get the Bills over the vaccinated threshold. Now, there's been a fallout from that, and I don't know if Brandon Beane would say that again. But regardless, we know very clearly where the GM and the head coach stand. So when the players, have expressed, as Jordan Poyer has in his case, the opposite point of view, it is incumbent upon us to ask the question. Now, again, we're not going to, beat him over the head with it. And if he says, I don't want to talk about it, it probably is a position where we should push a little bit and try and gain some answers, some knowledge about where the players stand, where the team stands on this topic. But we're not trying to create a headline. We're not trying to tick off a player for sure. We're just trying to see if we can gain any information about the topic. So let me see what you guys got here. No, yeah, Dan Walker. Corey, I'll get to your question about the cap space in a minute. Dan Walker, you're right. You can't force the vaccine on anyone. And that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to learn as much as we can about where the players stand on an important topic that the GM and the head coach have expressed differing views on, without causing as much problem as possible. Yeah, I mean, Corey Tessier, the Marshawn Lynch point, the player can continue to just say, I don't want to talk about it. And that's essentially what Jordan Poyer did today. Now, Jordan Poyer did say, he was asked at one point, are you concerned that this will create a problem in the locker room? And he said, we're just focused on football. Now, it's not necessarily a specific answer to that question, but I thought it was at least a little bit of a peek inside what's going on there, in that it sounds like from the we're just focused on football answer that there isn't much concern about the vaccine, about COVID. And look, you can all go home and debate about whether that's right or wrong, but the point of the question, the point of the discussion is to try and learn something. And I think we learned one thing, maybe not a big thing, but we might have learned something there. And that's why you continue to try and ask the questions. John Alla, I like the fact a lot of guys are in, made it to OTAs, encouraged by that. The interview was handled well, in my opinion, and I agree with you there. Yeah, the Bills had all but 7 players we counted in today. So it's 84 guys into OTAs, especially in a year where the Players Association was encouraging players not to attend. I think it's a good sign. Now, look, it's June 2nd. You're not going to win or lose many games this time of year, but it definitely is a good sign. Terry Thompson, good question. How many of now it's not a 53-man roster right now. It is a 91-man roster because 90 is the max, and the Bills have an extra spot because of Christian Wade and the international exemption. So there isn't a rule on that just yet, Terry Thompson, but the assumption is it's going to be 85%. So what's that going to be? 14 less. So you're probably talking about 76, 77 players would have to be vaccinated before the extended NFL restrictions will be lifted. So as of right now, the last I checked, the league doesn't have any team-wide stuff, but there are a lot of things that individual vaccinated players are allowed to do. One thing, for example, at this point, if you don't get vaccinated, when you get to your bye week, you cannot leave town. You have to still be in town, and you have to get tested every day. So while the NFL has not instituted a team-wide rule yet, that's expected, but there are individual rules for players at this point. Some govern right now, but some, again, are for later in the season. Dan Walker, will Star be back? I can't answer that right now. He certainly put a video out a few days ago that showed him working out. Whether that means he's working out to come back and play football or something else, I don't know. At this point, the Star won't be back stuff is total media speculation, simply because he wasn't here last year because he opted out and because he hasn't arrived yet. And look, COVID is still a concern. We just talked about this. There are many players, maybe not many, there are some players on this Bills team who are yet to be vaccinated and who are not certainly embracing the idea of getting vaccinated. So if you're Star Lotulelei, who opted out last year, and there may very well be an opt-out rule again this year, you may not want to play again this year. So there's a question there, but I think it's too early to worry about whether the idea that Star is not going to play. If we get the mandatory minicamp, which starts June 15th, and then Star doesn't show up, then we start to worry. Yeah, I mean, John Alla, you're right. I mean, the quicker the Bills, get back into shape, the better. But, I think really the football world in general overrates incredibly what happens on June the 2nd. Let me get Corey Tessier, your first question. Bills freeing up $7 million and change in cap space. Who are they going to go after? It's not Julio Jones because he would cost about $15 million. There would have to be some gigantic cap gymnastics for that to happen. Not out of the question, but that money the Bills freed up is not landing Julio Jones. They're close on Zach Ertz, but I don't think close enough. I think now, look, if Zach Ertz gets released and the Bills can sign him for less than the 8.5 he's scheduled to make this year, different story. But if the Bills are going to trade for him, they don't quite have the cap room for that just yet. I think the most likely scenario, here's a couple things maybe. I want to say there might be a multi-step process for what the Bills are thinking. It could be Brandon Beane says, well, if Zach Ertz gets released and we can sign him, we'll use the money for that. If Ertz doesn't come available, or if we have a corner, Steve Nelson, Richard Sherman, who we like, we might use the money there. Or if Josh Allen can agree to an extension or some other player they might want to sign long-term, Jermaine Edmonds, then we'll use the money for that. So I think that money will be used for something. They're not just opening up the money for no reason. but there might be a situation where the Bills are thinking it could be A, B, or C, and we'll see which option either comes up first as available or becomes the most palatable to us, right off the bat. So that's what I'd say to that. Again, they're not opening up that money for no reason. So, good questions tonight, guys. I appreciate you listening. Bills OTAs continue on Friday. 4 sessions next week. We'll have another media availability probably Tuesday or Thursday next week. So I'll catch you guys after that one. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later.